I want to thank you, my brothers, for attending this evening and just really caring enough to take the time out of your Sunday evening to continue this much needed discussion on lodge governance. We have joined the craft for many reasons: its philosophy, its history, for brotherhood. And hopefully your experience has been fulfilling, enlightening, and meaningful. We have also known for decades of the challenges facing Freemasonry and attracting new members and retaining our current ones. Without brothers willing to begin having the conversation to work together, we will not see, we see new programs come and go, but we will not see the end to this challenging dilemma. I don't care if you're a Mason for 1 year, 10 years, or 50 years, the conversations we're having tonight is ones that literally have been having for generations. While I do not believe that we will be solving all the problems this evening, with our brothers of goodwill and knowledge willing to tackle these issues, we will certainly are doomed for failure. So once again, I thank you for being here. I'm also grateful to you, Brother Johnson, for being here this evening. I am grateful for also just the amount of time and effort you put into the educating our brothers across our nation. Brother Johnson, for those of you who do not know, is the host of the Whence Came You podcast, and is a contributor to the Masonic Roundtable podcast, and co-author of It's Business Time, Adapting a Corporate Path for Freemasonry, and I'm a fan. I enjoyed your book, Brother Johnson, and I've enjoyed listening to your podcasts for what amounts to years now. Brother Johnson, I welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you and what a tremendous honor this is. I love this Craftsman Online. Ever since you guys really first started, I remember Mike RC talking a little bit about this, and I just think it's such a great idea. I know you guys are kind of New York centric, but I do want to say that you guys are reaching far beyond the borders of your state, and brothers across the nation and probably the world are really paying attention to what you're doing, and I think it's great. All right, so what I'm going to show here, the first thing up is I want to tell you guys, again, I'll talk a little bit about how to charter a lodge also. This is kind of a taboo topic in Freemasonry, because everybody says, hey, Freemasonry is a fraternity, it's not a business, and that is 100% correct. However, in order to be legitimized in the 21st century, in the 20th century, we had to kind of incorporate a lot of what we do. And that entailed becoming a Grand Lodge. Your Grand Lodge is incorporated or has some sort of tax filing status. In fact, all of our lodges have tax statuses, right? In Illinois, we have what's called a 501c10, which is a fraternal organization, and we have to pay taxes according to that. If we violate any of those tax rules, then we have to pay full tax on everything. Now, I know most lodges around the nation have some sort of tax break, but many don't. And that means y'all pay full taxes on everything. And so there's all this kind of business within Freemasonry that already exists. And what John and I attempted to do with this presentation, or with this book anyway, It's Business Time, is to basically look at the time-tested techniques, philosophies, and methods that have been used across Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 50 companies, to bring them great success. And sometimes that success comes in terms of course, money, right? But it also comes in the greater portion of, or the greater part of what we can talk about here. And that is not just in money, but in the way we operate with our people, because we are people. We're brothers. So people said, hey, why did you guys write this book? And the quick answer to that is that John and I are both involved actively in the business world. John is an agile, lean coach. So he consults for companies and goes in there and says, this is how you can do it better. What I do, I'm a data scientist by trade, and I work for a large medical company here in the United States. And we both kind of fell into this. Now, I wasn't always somebody who was in the, I guess, white collar world. If you guys are seeing, I got my Mad Money costume on. Um, if you guys watch Mad Money, that was funny. But anyway, I wasn't always in the white collar kind of world, right? I was for 10 years. I worked on airplanes outside at an airport. I was just worked on jet aircraft. So I kind of paid my dues and worked up and got involved in the corporate world. And what I used to do, my kind of leeway was working for OSHA as a Department of Defense kind of area around OSHA and what we did with aircraft. And there's a lot of business involved in OSHA. It's all bureaucracy, it's all paperwork, and a lot of business is that. So John and I really are both in business, and we said, there's a lot of these techniques and things that we can learn from in business and apply to Freemasonry, particularly in a lot of the things that we do that we kind of, I don't know, sometimes we stink at them, right? We're typically just not very involved in that side of things. We always think that this is a volunteer organization, which it is, but when we volunteer, if we fail to do the right things sometimes, then our lodges suffer. So I'm just going to start and going to go through some of the concepts in the lodge. Now, the first one that this was this groundbreaking book in the 90s, right? There's always these books that come out, and what happens is a business will buy into them and make everybody in the planet, they'll make everybody buy the book. And when they buy the book, they expect them to read it. It's the flavor of the week is kind of what I call it. But many times a business will adopt these things. So one of my first jobs ever was I was a cart pusher for Sam's Club, the old Walmart company, and I wasn't allowed to work inside. So I had to push carts because it's a warehouse and I was under 18. And they made us read this book, Who Moved My Cheese? So I'm a 16-year-old kid who decided I'm not reading this stupid book. But I did end up reading it later on in my 20s because I had to for work. This whole chapter is available at this link down here. It's a Midnight Freemason. I kind of put it out there for free. But what is Who Moved My Cheese even about? And really what it's about is there's a set of mantras in the book, and that uses mice to tell this story, mice in a maze. And so there's these mantras that keep getting written on the wall by one mouse and the other. And without going too much into it, I'll just tell you what these mantras are. And what the book is really trying to get businesses to understand are these: change happens. So society changes, and we will also have to change. We have to change when society changes. So we need to be ready. So that's number one. And for a company, that's true. But it's also true for Freemasonry in many respects. We have traditions, but we need to be on the forefront. Okay, number two is anticipate changes. So just like the stock market, we need to be ready to make changes or go broke. People read the stock market, they look and they say, hey, we need to move these things around. We need to do these things. We have somebody who professionally looks ahead. Do we have such a person in the craft? If we do, that person is looking at trends in the craft or looks at trends in the world and then seeing what we offer that is equitable to that thing and then invests in that, right? So number three is monitor change. So have someone who is up on the trends, again, know what to look for. And we need to stop thinking about semantic reasons to stay the same. Oh, we're traditional based. Yes, we are. And nobody's, telling us to change traditions. But we need to be aware of what we can change and when it's appropriate to change certain things. And then number four is this idea of adapting quickly. So this is if a change is presented, if we can do a couple things, if we can be excited about a change that's happening, then it makes it easier to happen. So investing in some of these changes as it comes to adapting. Think about when a new phone is coming out. A lot of people get really excited about that and they want to get that new phone. How could the craft use something like that? How could we get people excited about something and offer it, right? Get them to line up in days in advance and pre-order whatever that, equates to in the fraternity. Then there is, of course, just change, right? So we have to change or we're dead already. And another one of these mantras is enjoy the change. So Freemasonry is this progressive moral science. Change is who we are fundamentally, if we think about that. Then be ready to change quick. So this makes change exciting and painless. This is what this book is about. And in Freemasonry, we have a real opportunity to not the change is everybody always has this visceral reaction like, oh, we're going to change the way we do degrees or we're going to change the way we do this. No, I think it has more to do with in our fraternity, something like, upend some of the ways we used to do things. Look at how society is around us and how can we invest in ourselves to meet society at those same places. For instance, when we get a new candidate, gone are the days, right, where a guy comes in, he gets his degrees, bada boom, bada bing, and he's done, and we don't have to do anything other than, assign him a guy to go over a catechism. Those days are gone. We need to be there for our brothers, and people are men and coming into the fraternity are way more interested in what we have to offer in terms of personal relationships, I think, these days. So Lean Six Sigma, this was one of Jon's pieces. Now, Lean Six, if you guys are not familiar, is a really interesting way at looking at means of production. Jon talks about this in ways like making master masons. And for each one of these bullets, he's got some examples that relate to Freemasonry. But essentially, Lean Six Sigma has what they call 8 wastes. Defects, so efforts caused by rework, scrap, and incorrect information, things like overproduction. Are you making, he makes this direct correlation. Are we making too many masons too fast? Because then if you're doing that, then what's getting left behind? Those are your defects, right? Are we wasting time? Are we not utilizing talent? Do you have a web developer already in your lodge and he's not doing anything? Why do we have some, no hit on anybody, but we don't need somebody making a website who's going to make it on GeoCities. We need the real deal guy to come in here who does this for a living and say, hey, could you do a website for us? Right? That just makes sense. If you have a guy who's a painter, don't have the web guy come in and paint your lodge. Ask the painter to paint your lodge, right? So appropriate utilization of talent. Things like transportation, inventory, motion. Motion was a funny one. Jon talks about how you can save time. Years ago at the Grand Lodge of Illinois, there was something brought up like when a visitor or somebody knocks at the door during a meeting, the Tyler has to stand up and then announce to the worshipful, hey, there's somebody here. And then he has to go to the door, see who it is, come back to the chair, say who it is, then go back to the door to let him out. And they said, why don't you just let them report from the door and let them in or out there, right? That would eliminate motion, this elimination of waste. So it's kind of just a practical example. But something that's interesting here is if you look at the first letter of all of these things, it spells, so defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. It spells downtime. So it helps you kind of remember that. So this next thing was a book that my company gave out like 3 years ago called the Challenger Sale, which it's really kind of interesting. It basically says that there are different types of salesmen, and the book values of these different types of salesmen, the Challenger salesman the best. However, there are other kinds of salesmen. And the other one that's in this book is somebody they call the relationship builder. And this was kind of interesting to me because in sales, they said the relationship builder really was all about going to his customer saying, hey, I really like you, you really like me, let's go out to lunch. You kind of become friends, and then they order from you. But then when there's a problem, you're working for the customer, not your company. So you're not making the company money, you're working for the customer. So you're a relationship builder. And they viewed that as a problem. In Freemasonry, that's not really a problem, is it? We are relationship builders. So I say, don't throw that out here. I would say in this particular piece, we need to be relationship builders, but also challengers. So, what is a challenger? So, a challenger, if you haven't read that book, is basically somebody who goes into a customer and says, hey, did you know that other people deal with this thing that you're dealing with? And here's how they solved it. And here's that solution. We sell it. So, you're challenging them to something, and then you're offering the solution. You're a solutions company. So, how do we adapt that to Freemasonry? Well, look, that's real simple. You have a friend and he's like going through something. Oh, that's really interesting. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. There's a lot of guys in my fraternity who also deal with that. And, our fraternity has ways of helping you with that, you know, whatever that encapsulates, making good men better. We're tailoring a message that addresses the issue. So, uh, what is he longing for? And then does our fraternity offer it? And if it does, that could help us bring in a candidate. But more so than looking at what it does for us, what it does for that person. So think about what makes us different. How has Freemasonry helped you? Like seriously think about that question. Throw away all of our platitudes, like, right? Oh, it made me better dad. It made me a better father. No, 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 no. Really think about it. How did it help you? And did it stop you from going out drinking on a Wednesday nights? Like something personal, because that's how people really connect. So think about how it affects you, and how it might affect somebody else out there. So it's presenting somebody a solution for a problem that they might not realize that even had a solution to begin with. This is John's. He talks about the lean startup methodology. And really, what's interesting about the lean startup method is that it says just go. And as you grow as an organization, you make the changes on the fly. So, for instance, if you realize that you've begun something and you need a PayPal to accept payments, then you just create that. Maybe down the line, you said you needed XYZ, but then you found out that you actually don't need that. So you drop that off your plan. You make a pivot. So this lean startup methodology is a way of creating something with minimal, I wouldn't say effort, but with minimal investment. And this can be very key, especially with Freemasonry, because what we're doing much of the time is, excuse me, we're arguing about things that kind of don't matter. Um, and we're spending money that we don't have. And sometimes we're spending money on projects and things that we're overpaying for, because let's be honest, I love giving a brother the opportunity to serve a lodge and go to him if I'm a customer, right? Like if I'm a lodge and I need a new roof, and as a brother who owns a roofing company, yeah, I'm going to get a quote from my brother, but I'm not going to do business with my brother just because he's my brother, right? Like I got to have the lodge's best interest at hand. So sometimes lean, meaning don't expense so much, in this kind of instance. The one-on-one. This one is one of my favorites. The one-on-one, if you are familiar, is not really a business practice, say just in business only. What this is really about is identifying talent. And when I first started with my company, they said to me, Robert, like, what is the thing that gets you up in the morning and gets you excited about this job? And I would tell them, and they would say, well, you're not doing a whole lot of that right now, Is that something you really want to go for? And I say, yeah, it is. And they say, cool, let's get you in that field. And then every week I would have a call with somebody who does that at my company. So what we're doing here is we're identifying talent. So it's employee development scheme, really. And it works. I used to meet with my bosses every 2 weeks, and they would talk about my role, the outlook, what I'm enjoying, and really kind of laying out my career path. They said, at this company, we don't just hire you and let you do your thing. We build executives. And I was like, what? This is crazy. This is a crazy idea. My company investing in me, besides just a paycheck. That's wild. Well, in Freemasonry, we have such a great opportunity to utilize this technique. What if the worshipful master or some brother of the lodge who could interview new guys coming in and saying, so what have you liked so far about our fraternity? Uh, instead of the catechism and doing just uh, things of that nature, we start from the very beginning and we build a relationship and ask them what they want to be involved with the lodge, what they want to do, how they're enjoying things. So think about pre-petition. Hey, welcome, right? Here's some reading material. That's usually where we stop, and then they come back and maybe we talk to them a little bit before we get a petition, maybe. But what if instead it was, here's some reading material, and by the way, why don't you stop by next week? We're going to have a dinner, or we're going to have a little get together on the side. It's not at the lodge. We're going to go over to Mike's house and have a pizza, have a couple beers or something. um, or maybe it's like a lodge book club that you don't actually have to be a master mason to be in. Maybe it's just like a leadership book or something, and you kind of go through it and talk together about those things. And then through the petition, you can kind of structure the conversation about Freemasonry. um, what do you want to gain from becoming a member of Freemasonry? After the first degree, how was it? What did you learn? What was weird? Talk to them about these things, and do the same thing after the second and third degrees. And then you start to set intervals to meet with your brothers. And through this process, you'll then identify somebody who says, well, I would really like to take over for the website, or maybe they want to be your next 20-year secretary. I don't know. But the point is, this is a key thing. And what a lot of this is driving toward, and you'll notice this, I hope, is that this is really communication based. We can't just sit by and let somebody come in and then walk out and hope they come back. This is a constant process of touch. As you walk through the lodge, who's the touch, right? Like you walk by and, hey, just want to let you know I'm still here. I still care about you. I'm curious about what you're interested in here and what you want to do. This is Jon's piece about uh, basically production line. And I love this one. Basically, the acquisition is new guys coming in. The factories, we turn them on to Freemasons. We get them to be Masons, right? And then there's that return customers. How do we get them back? Or there's a lot of ideas of what that retention idea could be. We initiate, we have members, they pay the dues, yay. And then that retention portion, like what does that really look like? Very much convinced that retention revolves, it's a larger umbrella, but it involves education. That lodge education is a reason why you went ahead and probably joined. You wanted to know more. So by knowing more, or by being offered things that will teach you more, maybe that's social stuff, maybe that is philosophical stuff, maybe that's leadership, maybe that's Toastmaster type speech or whatever that could be. But there's a reason why you come back, and we need to identify what that is. Now, every lodge has its flavor, so know what your flavor is. Have a mission statement or something that people can talk about. And speaking of talking about, that brings us into that referral area. We always say that we ask our members, like, are you sure you're here of your own free will and accord? Many times I wonder how true that is, because if our dads told us to go do it or we were influenced by a friend, then that's not really totally true, but it still is. How are we, with our referrals? Are we talking, do people know we're Freemasons, and do they know that's like our life? We love it. And if so, then maybe they'll come in and because they want to be a part of it too. The Masonic Factory was an episode that we did on the Masonic Roundtable, episode number 256, if you all are interested. What the book really goes into is how to be better, how to make brothers into real friends, not just acquaintances, how to be someone people talk about in a good way. You want to get people to think about things your way. Think about when you're the master of a lodge. If you're the master of a Masonic lodge, how much easier would it be if people thought about things the same way you're thinking about them? Maybe you can get some extra stuff done. It really gives you what we say in the fraternity during the installation of the master. You are given you've earned the key to men's hearts. So also it allows you to win over candidates. And in this respect, there's challenges here in winning over a candidate as well. Probably a topic for another night, but how do we address people who aren't into Freemasonry because it is a fraternity? I've come up with that in my own place of work. But this book also helps you out with wages. In our fraternity, we're talking about respect, honor, and dignity, how to be a better officer, how to handle grievances. Now, grievances are something that most people, I think, in Freemasonry, they're aware of a grievances committee, but how often do we actually deal with them? They are something that is very serious. Most people find out about the grievances in their lodge when they become the master, and the secretary sits them down and goes, "Okay, let me give you the rundown. This is all the garbage going on in our lodge," right? Sometimes there's dirty laundry, and that's a real bummer. But how do we deal with that stuff better? And then moving into this area of how to be confident when we're doing these things, understanding how people think, and to arouse enthusiasm in people. Uh, I'll tell you right now, John's here. There have been many times. John and I are in a group chat, right, with all of our brothers from the Masonic Roundtable, and there's many times we kind of were tanking hard on Freemasonry. Something's like bothering us, right? And one of us will arouse enthusiasm in another brother. There's 6 sections to the book, which really deal with handling people, not criticizing, being sincere. And I can't emphasize this enough, because while the book talks about how to influence people, it's also about being sincere. And I mean, not just acting like it. You have to really, really care. And if you don't care, that's a problem. But we need to care. Smile, right? Remember the names. No excuses. But I know that's why we all have name tags. I have an assistant area district deputy. I think he's going to be the area deputy soon. I hope. He's a great guy, and his name is Bob Nielsen. Bob Nielsen wears a name badge at Grand Lodge every year that says, "Yep, I don't remember your name either." That's what it says. And he's a great guy, but we should try to remember names, right? Listen and be present in our conversations. That's a really difficult thing to do. People don't think about it often. Talk to people about what the fraternity needs through a person's interest. Make others feel important. Really thank them for the things that they do for the lodge, and in and outside of the lodge. If you have somebody working in healthcare, it's probably a great idea to say, "Hey, I just want to, give the lodge a second to recognize, these 3 nurses we have in the lodge who have been working around the clock for COVID or whatever it is, particularly in the last year. make sure we're doing things, we're being sympathetic, we're recognizing, showing respect for the opinions of others. When we're wrong, make sure we know that we're wrong and we say it out loud. Yeah, I was wrong. You got to own up. And sometimes that means we also have to do some other things that are more difficult, like challenging people. And challenging people can be difficult also, but is a delicate art. And I'm sure that Masonic administrators are no strangers to that art because of the nature of what we do as Freemasons. We are people, hopefully. um, there's also lots of things like, particularly, there are 7 rules for a great life that are in the original book that we kind of outline in its business time as well. But I want to move on to the Agile Manifesto. Jon, since you're here, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure thing. Thanks. It's good to be with everyone today. So it's no secret that I take my vocation into my Freemasonry, and what I normally do is look at business processes and make them more efficient. And the best way over the past 20 years has been this Agile movement. And the source document of this Agile movement was the Agile Manifesto. You can go look this up at agilemanifesto.org. And it started out for software, as you can see, but they said there's got to be a better way to deliver value to people. And so keep that in your mind as we walk through this. Instead of like the command and control, I'm the boss, do what I say, what if we shifted the conversation and really cared about people first? And so if you go back for a second, Robert, to the other slide, we want to focus on individuals and interactions with people instead of following processes, following meetings, etc. We want to focus on working products than just documenting things for documenting sake. We want to focus on collaborating with our customer instead of saying, sorry, it's what the contract says, I can't change. And we also want to focus on responding to change because change is going to happen instead of trying to avoid it and follow a plan blindly. It doesn't mean we don't have documentation, doesn't mean we don't have tools, but it just means when we're at a crossroads, we're going to value working with people over rigid processes. So the same is true. Everything, it's a natural flow down from how to win friends and influence brothers. If you take this next slide, Robert, and just what if we tweak that? And we actually had at our essence a fraternal manifesto. Manifesto is just a fancy way of saying, here's a statement of our ideas. Here's a statement of our principles. What if we could just put up at, over the door of every lodge room, a manifesto that says, we value friendly and brotherly interactions instead of, but we've always done it that way. What if we said we value proven lodge outcomes over speculative solutions? Well, I think we should do this. Okay, great, let's try it. But if it works, we're going to keep doing it. If it doesn't work, we're going to try something else. What if we value fraternal collaboration over rules and edicts? That would be a big shocker, wouldn't it? If we said, instead of do as I say and being treated like children, what if we just said, let's focus on what's best for us as friends and brothers? And finally, what if we valued responding to change instead of following these plans and edicts that we've stuck to for the past 40, 60 years? And that's not saying we don't have good solutions. It doesn't mean we don't have rules and edicts. You can see there is some value of the items on the right, but what if we took a new, fresh approach to the way we interact with each other as brothers and use this as a guiding set of principles for how we work collaboratively, fraternally going forward? And so I took that correlation and said it's pretty simple to start with something that values working with people in the software world. And by the way, over the past 20 years, that's adapted to pretty much every industry. I mean, SpaceX uses these principles. Automobile manufacturers use these principles. So it's now not just limited to software. So why can't we take the best of this set of principles and apply them to the fraternity? Robert?
Yeah, for sure. I love this idea, and it's kind of mind blowing because it goes in the face of what we're so used to in the fraternity. We are, I mean, essentially a benevolent dictatorship in many respects. And a lot of those things that we follow and we have edicts for, we respect them and we follow these rules. But as we move forward in time, things like technology have drastically changed the way we can operate as a fraternity more efficiently. And nowhere on the world is that now more apparent than in the last 2 years,
Agreed.
of what's going on. So we've proven that this stuff works. Too big to fail. This is just a warning. Now, Grand Lodges, we're always thinking that we're too big to fail, and we're wrong because we don't get a government buyout. What's interesting about this is, it would have been about 3.5 years ago. I had a conversation with my incoming Grandmaster who said, if we don't have members, then the Grand Lodge it gets moved to just a charitable board, and that's it. There's no more Masonry in Illinois. And I said, you really think that's the case? You don't think people would just say, XYZ Lodge reconstituted as this sovereign on this date? People think that we're just too big to fail sometimes. They're not looking at the future of what can happen if we don't act. And one of the interesting pieces to this is we have what we consider all the answers, landmarks and charges, but these things don't survive. They don't guarantee our survival, rather, right? So it's just a warning to say, don't necessarily think that our Grand Lodges have all the answers. The brothers who are watching this and who have listened to these things know, and I hope you all realize that you're the reason why there is a Grand Lodge. You're the constituency, and your ideas filtered up through the proper channels can make it to the top and make a real difference so that we don't face something that could later be, fatal.
Brother Robert, if I just may chime in at this one moment, this is Steve Rubin, for those, I don't know if my picture is on the screen. I would even correct that and say that the brothers should really know that they're not the reason why Grand Lodge exists. They are the Grand Lodge. And for too long, the perception in the craft is that Grand Lodge is this other outwardly, being this occupying force, when the reality is the power is in the lodges and the brethren. And for too long, the brethren have been relinquishing that authority, and quite frankly, to the detriment of the craft. I'll let you go back.
Oh, right, Worshipful Steve. That is absolutely true. I cannot tell you how much of a paradigm shift it was for me in particular, coming up through my mother lodge. And I would hear my my officers of my lodge consistently complain about having to go to Grand Lodge sessions every single year. Oh, why? Why are you going to go to Grand Lodge sessions? People would ask. And the issue is that they were always so down on Grand Lodge, us versus them mentality. And I'll tell you what, my first year going to Grand Lodge as a junior warden of my lodge, I have not missed a year since. I have been going to Grand Lodge sessions for 9 years now, or 8 or 9 years now, and I never miss it. Why? Because I love being involved, and the brothers who go know exactly what you're talking about, that we are the Grand Lodge. If you want change, you go through the channels, you propose the change, they vote. It is a real working machine, and the faster people understand this, the better. I full on agree with you. Another concept here that we talk about in some circles, and sometimes we get into this one in the presentation, sometimes I don't, but Think and Grow Rich is another really great part of the book. It is really a kind of a time-tested, one of the best-selling business books of all time, and primarily deals with I don't know, it's kind of hokey, right? It's the secret, the law of attraction in a lot of ways. And whether you believe in the physics, the actual science behind something like observation, perception, and reality, or whether you believe that it's, just hocus pocus, or whether you take kind of a psychological approach to this, in that if you have a desire and you believe it, you necessarily unconsciously work toward those things. And how does this work for a lodge? Well, it simply comes down to, what if you just got up every single day and took out your pen and paper and you wrote down everything you wanted your lodge to do, and everything that you want your lodge to be, and everything that you want your Masonic experience to be? And what if you wrote it down every single day and recited it and believed in that change? You necessarily start to work towards some of those things. And eventually you find yourself on the other end of it saying, wow, I did this, or we did this. And so it's kind of a cool concept. And that it has a great chapter about being persistent. And it says, failure is your best teacher. And you have to believe that. So the next portion of this goes back to too big to fail a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about membership numbers really quick. Currently, I think John has this number, right? 924,380 mainstream Freemasons in 2021. I'll pass it over to you, John, for some good news, bad news. What do you got?
Well, looking at current trends, and those trends go back since 1921, as we started collecting them with the Masonic Services Association of North America. Just trending that out, just forecasting the rate of change, we end up somewhere in this ballpark, Robert. In 2040, well, we're down to zero if nothing else changes. Now, hopefully you and I and everyone else on this call will live past 2040, but the point proves that there's no uptick in the curve, right? If we're in the pandemic trying to flatten the curve, we actually want to grow this curve. This is a curve we want to go up. And we have over 60 years of the same slope. So for my data nerds, that just means nothing has changed. We have been at the same constant rate of decline for 60 years. So it's not a current problem. It's not a previous administration problem. It's been a problem we've had for quite some time. So whether you believe Masonry's dying, whether you believe Masonry's refining, that's still 19 years away. And so, the goal is, this should be a wake-up call, if nothing else, right? We want to never see it get to this low because of, everything we have, invested in it. But at the same time, we can't argue to Robert's point that, well, Masonry will always be there, because the data just shows we're not on a good path. So if you knew that your car was going to crash into a wall in 1 mile, hopefully you would take the steering wheel and start to just turn it just a little bit and try something. So if you knew where the wall was going to be, what would you do to just move that wheel just a little bit? And that's all we have to just hope to nudge yourself a little bit forward.
Right. And that implies like actual action. You have to do something. You got to steer it. You got to apply a little bit of force. Maybe, Freemasonry is an old organization. We don't have power steering. So sometimes it takes a little bit more force. And I think we have that ability to do it. Going back to what Right Worshipful Brother Steve had pointed out, that involves every single member of the fraternity as the Grand Lodge, as moving forward toward solutioning. So in terms of conclusion, I would just say that, again, these are just, they're not things that you have to take into account and treat everything about Freemasonry as a business. I would say that there are things within the business world that make sense to use. This particular book, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is at this point, it's been out a few years, so it's time tested and it is brother approved. We've had several brothers come up to John and I, and I'm not going to toot our own horn. I'm going to toot the horns of every person out there who came up with these business ideas, and say that they bought that they loved it, and that they bought a stack, 15 copies that they gave to their Grand Lodge. They gave one to each officer, and they just talk about it as they all read this one chapter and talked about how they can implement that one thing in their own jurisdiction. And of course, it doesn't work for everybody, right? Because each jurisdiction is different, it has different rules. But the point is to look at the idea itself and see how it can apply and what solutions it brings. John, any thoughts?
No, and that's it. It's we're just trying to use best practices out in industry, nonprofit world, apply it to just a different nonprofit, and really get back to the core essence of the fraternity that we know and love, and we want to grow that too. So hopefully we have something a little bit greater and stronger tomorrow.
And I'll say, anybody who is interested, right? This is the book. It's out there. You can get it at that URL. This is where you can find John and I every single week. And the Audible version of the book was read by Brother Jared Stanley, who used to do and still does sometimes, I think, the What is a Mason podcast, video cast. And I wanted to make sure I let you all know about that, because it is a fantastic program. He's now the Grand Secretary of the
Grand Lodge of the state of Mississippi.
Thank you. I knew it was M.
I loved his accent. That's why.
Yeah, Mississippi. He's a great guy and did a great job with the book. So want to always thank Brother Jared for his work there.
Wonderful presentation. As I mentioned, I think before we actually got started, I was unable to physically read the book. I actually downloaded the book from Audible. I listened to it 3 times as I was driving around New York State. I enjoyed the Audible version immensely. Got a tremendous amount out of it, and the work was wonderful. I highly recommend it for the brothers. The fact is that, fortunately, I've actually read a fair number of the books that you talk about, and it's wonderful that you are, bringing that to the craft, because I think it's long overdue. What are your thoughts? I would just kind of like to throw this out to you, both you, Brother RJ, and Brother John. What are your thoughts? We're talking about this as individual Masons, and of course, Masonry is individual, but yeah, we work collectively. We're talking in many respects about doing this for our individual lodges. What I've been saying for quite some time now is that as I go out and visit many of our lodges around New York State, and I suppose, and I presume that it's similar around our country, and that is, while there are certain lodges that are able to absolutely function and tackle all of these projects and these processes that you're referring to, many of our lodges, just because of dwindling membership, do not have the manpower, the skill sets within their ranks. And that's where I've always thought that it's incumbent now more than ever for our Grand Lodges to really be just helping hands out there for our lodges. I like to say that all of our Grand Lodges should need not be our big brothers, but just our brothers. And just try to work out. For example, there are lodges that may not have anyone with the skill sets to do their webpage, but in an entire Grand Lodge, there has to be a committee formed that can literally get out there and assist lodges to get some presence on the digital platform. So these are the types of things I think that we have to start talking not only individually and within the lodge, but really start making it a collective conversation in Grand Lodge. You raised the point earlier about how maximizing brothers' skill sets. Literally, just this weekend, I was talking to a brother who's a plumber, and he was telling a story about how he was asked by some Masonic body to assist on this renovation project, and he spent 2 days painting a fence instead of fixing all the plumbing for free at this location. In fact, he actually said to the powers that be after the weekend, he said, like, I'm a plumber, I'm a certified plumber. I can bring you 10 other plumbers, and we can get you the plumbing supplies at cost and do all the work for free. Use us, we want to do this. And so this is what you're talking about, and I think it's brilliant. And we have to start really recognizing just the most basic fundamentals of management, whether it's a business or a lodge. I mean, maximize their membership.
Yeah, I would just echo, part of the first thing you talked about was Grand Lodges being not big brother, just a brother. And that's so crucial. But it also means that for the most part, there's a lot of brothers out there, and God bless them, but they aren't working for their lodge in the 29 days between meetings. And there's a lot that happens between those meetings, and sometimes that means actually having to give a little of yourself, a little bit more than just that meeting night. Particularly if you have volunteered as such. I'm reminded of the imagery that we see in Scottish Rite so often of the pelican, cutting itself and feeding, its own blood to the youngs. Right? It's this idea of self-sacrifice, and so, if you had like a Grand Lodge web developer who might need to develop a website for a lodge, like I think we in Illinois we have Maury, so they threw up a lodge website for everybody. But in states where they don't have things like that, maybe it's beneficial to have a Grand Lodge person hop on the phone one day and go, what do you want your website to look like? Why don't we come down, have coffee one day and just build you a website? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of lodges in a state and that would get crazy after a while, but that's the kind of dedication I think sometimes we need. And in particular, Grand Lodges who have those resources can do that, and other times we can't. But identifying the talent helps us find who has the time to do those kinds of things. Because if you're an expert, you can do it lickety split. It's not going to take you all day. John, anything?
I think you were dancing around the topic there, right, Worshipful, about how do we enhance the value of the Masonic experience? And so that's going to be different for every single Grand Lodge. It's also going to be different for every single lodge, because as we know, everybody's lodge experience is different due to the culture of that individual lodge. And so as some people know, fascinated with demographics of the craft and the decline in membership and what can we do about it. And after I kind of looked at some of the preliminary results, some of the questions I got asked all the time was, okay, great. We had that brick wall a mile away. What are we going to do about it? What do you recommend? And I don't have an answer for that. And the reason is Masonry is hyper local. It is, it starts at your lodge. So in that vein, the best thing we can do for the future of Freemasonry right now is experiment. And I'm not talking about experiment with the ritual or experiment with our landmarks. I am saying experiment with how can we try things to grow the Masonic experience. And so if your lodge has a great turnout for your Saturday pancake breakfast, it's great, double down on that. If no one's showing up for your pancake breakfast other than the same 5 guys, maybe it's time to try something new. And that's going to be different for every single lodge. And that's going to be, soliciting, input and value from all the brethren of that lodge, because as we all know, there's churn, right? There's brothers who retire and move away. There's new members coming in. And so your traditions might be up for review. And so that's certainly part of that experimentation, to say, even though we've been doing this for the past 20 years, are we getting to use a business term, are we getting the return on investment we always have? Or is it time to look at it a little bit differently, try something different? And I'll leave you with my favorite Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, which is, all of life is an experiment, and he who has the most experiments wins.
Thank you, Brother John. I see right where Brother Robert Remington has his hand up. Brother Robert, would you like to unmute yourself and you can ask your question, brother?
Robert and Brothers Robert and John, it's great to actually talk to you guys, because we've been watching you for a while. As a matter of fact, the newbies that we have actually gotten to see you, and it's helped pose questions. We have a different tact lately, and it's been there for a while, but it seems to work. And that is to show them how the sausages are made, so they're not in shock after they're a master mason. And the good thing about that is you find out more about the brothers as you go along, or the potential brothers, and they already come to the floor with solutions before they've even hit Master Mason.
Wow.
And that's been so. You were talking about ROI. Our return on investment is ideas that help us grow, and the cool thing is our upcoming set of degrees after this long period of hibernating, so to speak, since we had the chance to communicate with them on Zoom, show them stuff like you, show them stuff like Craftsman and so on, is we're going to jump by 13% in our next set of
Whoa.
degrees. So
That's amazing.
before October, we have that many out of our lodge. We kind of cut the dead weight, so to speak, and we're putting them in the position of, if you ever want to sit in a chair, you better come with some ideas. Don't just chase an apron. And I said, go progressively. I tell them my cautionary tale, which was right out of Master Mason into JD, and confused as all hell, blind leading the blind. And as one of you mentioned before, how much I've learned by my failures. So these days I've been really enjoying the change. And while everybody has the doom and gloom scenario, as we usually know, even since the statistics and everything, I used to work at Gilmore Research Group, a lot of the data that you're putting forth today is already old, based on the inquiries that we're getting, at least for our area. It's not everywhere in New York, but at least in our area, we're getting more inquiries than we have a chance to handle at times. And that's why the new guys go to work helping us by getting to all know each other. They help us with the vetting process. I mean, we have the official vetting process, but the best vetting is to, as you said, the one-on-ones that you get to have, find out what they can contribute. And it's not all about what they can do for us, what we can do for them, but what we can do together. And speaking of edicts, having been in education before, I'm really sick of 5-year plans. All right. I've been realistic enough to look a quarter century ahead. The reason why I do this is because there was at one point something called Metropolis 2020 that the American Academy of Sciences put out about what they were going to do with Chicago. They basically did it. And I could already see what was wrong, because when I was in Chicago at the time, instead of taking care of Cabrini Green, they destroyed Cabrini Green, while artists were helping to develop things that brought down certain statistics that were a problem. I'm happy to say, after, 6 years working with Dan Center of Harlem over here, how many times I run into somebody, and instead of them being the awful statistic, they get to tell me what colleges they went to, the colleges I never got to go to, and so on. So that's what I think the power of the fraternity has in that respect, that if you get into community involvement and so on, that's your ROI. It's not how many funds you raise. Of course, you need to raise funds to keep a roof over your head and so on. But the thing is what are you paying forward? And
Yeah.
are you involved in your community? So thank you for your videos.
Well, no, thank you. I appreciate that.
Rather.
Yeah. One thing in my work with nonprofits and government space, because they're not for profit, right, by definition, ROI doesn't make sense for them. Like, I get a budget every year, and I'm not supposed to grow profit. And so the term gets twisted around, and the better term for those and Freemasonry as a whole is, what is your return on value? And so value is subjective, but value is part of that Masonic experience. If your lodge values growth and membership, then what are you doing to grow your membership? If your lodge values the family experience, what are you doing to promote activities for the kids, activities for the wives. So if your lodge values charity, what charities are you doing, and are you doing more than you did last year? So that should be the focus, not ROI as in, $1 in, $10 out, right? Because as you said, we need money to operate the lodge, but that's about where it should stop. But what are we doing to make an impact? It's replace value with impact. That's another way to say that. What are you doing to make an impact in the world? And that's what Freemasonry is.
Yeah, I love that idea of impact, because when I think about return on investment, I think about, wow, we saved X amount of dollars, and those dollars that we were now going to earmark for XYZ, we can dump back into the PTA, or we can go to the local high school and be like, hey, teacher, we know you all sent all our kids like an additional list of 10,000 rolls of paper towels and Clorox wipes that now I have to buy because the school doesn't pay you enough to get those things. So instead, here's $1,500. Have fun with it, right? Just things like that. And we also should be aware too that when we're looking at community in particular, we can't be scared. I think a lot of times people are scared to get too involved in community because somehow community can be politicized. And I think we need to look past that. I think we need to, look at, in particular, our teachers. We need to look at our community organizations that are out there helping people on the streets, or veterans, whatever the case is. Just because a politician likes it doesn't make it political. And we can invest, I think, in our communities as long as we keep a lot of that stuff in mind.
So fantastic having you here. I've sat in on a couple of other presentations where you've given it at other lodges, but for the rest of us, our brothers who have not had the chance to see your handsome faces and have only heard your shining voices over the years, I'm sure it's a pleasure for them. But once again, what you're doing is so important for the craft. We want to just thank you for being here this evening, for moving us forward, for continuing this conversation. Everyone, check out their books, check out their podcasts, check out their future works. We want to support each other, as Brother RJ said earlier. On behalf of your brothers of Craftsmen Online, I bid you good night, my brothers.